Hey everyone, thank God it's Friday. It's another opportunity to highlight and answer one of our questions on family matters and relationships using godly standards and the scriptures, which of course is what this channel, Ask Pastor Nike, is all about. My name is Nike Ayola and I am the host of this channel. My husband and I participated in an online seminar tagged Parenting Today last weekend. This seminar was organized by Graceland Church of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, RCCG, and the other churches in their zone, CA9. I believe that CA9 means California Zone 9. It was such an awesome time that I just want to bless parents everywhere with some of the nuggets of truth that came out during my preparation and participation. Now I believe that all of us can deploy these truths effectively as we raise our children and wards, and possibly, for people who are in my age bracket, our grandchildren as well. The question for episode 7 therefore is this: how do I effectively parent a challenging child? Now that term, challenging child, is a very broad categorization, and in order to be effective, the nature of the challenge needs to be isolated and particularly addressed. You see, a one-size-fits-all kind of answer will probably end up muddying the waters and creating more problems than solutions. So, for this video, I want to assume that that challenge is that of a child being difficult, unmanageable, and sometimes exasperating. And I believe that all of us either have or at least know parents who have such children. The first thing I want to talk about is the mistake that a lot of us parents make. And maybe this mistake could be because we place a stronger value than necessary on people's opinions of us, when we see our children's characters as being a total reflection of ours as well. Now, I don't mean that this viewpoint is totally false, no, but that it is only partially correct. And that is because most of the time, our children imbibe and project our values. There are times when we have tried our darnest best and done almost everything like it should have been done. And I say almost because we are neither perfect or divine. And then some of our kids still don't turn out the way we expect them to. So let me offer us some relief up front, at least for those who have really tried and are putting in their best efforts. Our challenging children are not our scorecards, not with God, and it shouldn't be with men, including ourselves either. If you feel that the way your children turn out is the sole indication of your parenting ability, I want you to just think about the fact that we are all God's children too. Let me leave it at that for now. The Bible is filled with examples of successful and godly men and women with challenging children. I want to just give us a few examples here. We have Isaac and Rebekah, a type of Christ and a type of the Holy Spirit, who had a child like Esau who kept getting it wrong. Esau married 3 wives even when his father had only one. Hear what Genesis 26 and verse 35 says about Esau. But Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. Then, of course, we have Jacob, Esau's twin brother, who has sons like Simeon and Levi, who committed multiple murder. And you can see Genesis 34 for more details. Even King David, a man after God's heart, had children like Amnon, who raped his sister Tamar, and Absalom, who attempted to unseat his father in a coup. You will find those accounts in the book of 2 Samuel, chapters 13 and 15. Solomon, with all his wisdom, was not spared either. His heir Rehoboam had never learned independent thinking and so lost the kingdom in one generation. The last example I want to give is that of all of us, the children of God. Yes, I'm talking about you and I. We are God's children too. And we know that God has no grandchildren. So look at us. Do you know any parent with more challenging children? So this leads me to the second point that I would like to make. And if I classified the first point as a mistake, this one would be a wrong assumption. Some of us were challenging children when we were growing up and when our parents were raising us, right? Now, we suddenly want to have children who are compliant, children who listen to us and do everything we tell them. How is that even remotely possible? They are children after all. Genesis chapter 8 and verse 22 clearly tells us that this law of sowing and reaping whatever we sow continues as long as this earth we are on remains. Family life is actually cyclical, and there are traits and experiences that are repeated generation after generation. The wrong assumption here is in believing that all consequences are taken away when we made a choice to follow Jesus. So, for some of us, the children that we classify as challenging today are simply us reaping the fruits of our earlier disobedient lives. And remember, whatever parents did in moderation, their children will do in excess. That's give and it shall be given back to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together and overflowing, that we love to quote from Luke chapter 6 and verse 38. He's not talking about money alone. And I'm saying this for every parent who is thinking right now, oh, but I was not that challenging. Now, before our minds begin to take us on a guilt trip, let me add that we shouldn't be overly worried as parents if we are in this situation. When our children encounter their own transformation, just like we did, everything about them is bound to change too. I will talk about this a little bit later. The third point I want to make is that of a wrong definition, and it's about that word, love. There is no doubt that we love our children passionately. In fact, chapter 15 of my book, From Princess to King, is dedicated to the subject of a mother's love, which is second only to God's love for us. Loving our children is a natural outflow for every parent. But how we define that love and how we interpret it can be the challenge. Some of us see love as being permissive, giving our children everything they need, everything they want, everything they ask for, as long as we can afford it. But love also equals responsibility. It includes holding your loved one accountable and letting them own their choices. That's the only way they can learn and grow. And that is how they can position themselves to become usable by God. The bottom line, therefore, is that love and discipline must work hand in hand. That is essentially what my first book, Don't Ruin Their Lives, tries to establish. Hebrews 12 and verse 8 makes this clear, and I'm going to be reading it from the Passion Translation. It says, "We all should welcome God's discipline as the validation of authentic sonship. For if we have never once endured His correction, it only proves that we are strangers and not sons." Responsible parenting means that you hold back on some things even though you can afford it, so that your child can learn to establish himself or herself, learn self-control, and be rid of an entitlement mentality. That is exactly how God deals with us. God can afford anything, but He doesn't give us everything. Many times, our struggle with indisciplined and unruly children dates back to when they were toddlers. That's when the seed was sown. Some of us never created boundaries for our children, and many who did kept shifting those boundaries to accommodate them. First of all, the lack of rules, and secondly, the failure to enforce the rules that we make are the twin reasons responsible for more than 50% of indisciplined children that we see today. In fact, they are probably responsible for a lot of the indisciplined adults in most societies as well. I want us to consider this. Discipline is the validation of your love for your children. Another aspect of a wrong interpretation of love is expressed when we as parents do everything to prevent our children from experiencing pain or suffering. I'm sure we know that we can't do everything for our children, but even if we can, we shouldn't. We must learn to release our children to the consequences of their choices. I know it's hard. Yes, I know it's hard. Sometimes when you have to sit on your fingers and watch your children follow a path that won't result in a good outcome. And many times we want to rush in and save them. But when we have done our parts in raising them, that's exactly what we need to do. Let them live and learn. I'm sure we all remember that experience is still the best teacher. I also need to add that even if we have the opportunity to, it is counterproductive to try to save our children through the back door, showing them solidarity for an act or a choice that they are being punished for. If your child is being made to pay for something they did wrong, the best thing you can do for them is to offer them support, in terms of prayers, encouragement, and a listening ear if need be, as they go through the process. Yes, they may suffer. And yes, you will suffer along with them. But suffering can be good and even essential for the soul. Jesus Christ suffered. He suffered not for His offenses, but for us. And you can imagine how God the Father felt when Jesus hung on the cross. He had the power to deliver Him. So it's not that He could not, but He did not. He did not save Him because there can be no salvation for us today without that suffering. Before I make the last point, let me give us an example of a righteous man who loved his children so much that he did everything for them, including trying to enforce a right standing with God by becoming their mediator. And I want you to remember, there is only one mediator between God and men, who is Jesus Christ. This man's children never learned to take responsibility for their actions, and because of that, their lives became inconsequential with God. Not even one of them had a relationship with God that would have singled him or her out for deliverance when disaster befell their family. And you can read the account of how Job was always doing for his children what he should have required that they do for themselves from the book of Job chapter 1 and verses 2 to 5. Finally, I want to say that if we have challenging children, and especially if they are already grown, such that our interaction and influence is somewhat limited, by reason of their age, I still have good news for us. With God, we will always have a win-win situation. We must never underestimate the power of the Holy Spirit to impact our children and secure their lives. Now, I have said this many times, and I will say it again. Evil does not win. No matter how bad or decadent it gets, as long as we are around on planet Earth, there will always be more of God's grace, more of God's light, His mercy, and His love to overwhelm darkness. The Church of Jesus will not go limping and struggling into eternity. No, but gloriously and triumphantly. No matter how it seems like we are far from it right now, this is our destiny. And that includes every one of us with our children, and even the ones who are right now not compliant. Every parent with a challenging child must be ready to invest massively in prayers and to trust that God will move heaven and earth if need be to save and deliver our children, because that promise is for us and our household. Never lose sight of this truth. Not everything is caused by God, but God makes everything to work together for our good. Now, I prayerfully hope that this episode has answered some of the burning questions in the heart of some of us and has been beneficial to everyone listening. If that is true, then we have the responsibility of sharing this video with other parents and parents-to-be so that we can be blessings to others as well. Next week, with special help and grace from God, I will be delving into a very difficult aspect of a challenging child. What if your child tells you he or she is gay? What does the Bible have to say about this? Don't forget to like this video by clicking the thumbs up sign and telling your friends and family about this channel. Permit me to give a shout out to my first child, Dr. Irene Ebonluwa, and her husband, Dr. Joseph Oluwabusayo, who celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary yesterday, May 26. Please join me and the other parents to pray for many more years of a blessed, healthy, and rewarding relationship for them. I will also like to remind everybody that my new book, From Princess to King, A New Way to Be Woman, is available for purchase as I round up this video with the link that shows all the outlets from where you can get them. See you next Friday, and do have a lovely weekend.